Hey boys, today we're going to be building the Meng F-18 Super Hornet. My hot take is that I think the Super Hornet is way uglier than the Legacy Hornet, but I just didn't have the testicular fortitude to open up a kinetic kit today, so here we are. Opening the box, we see an immense number of sprues, 80% of which go towards the ordnance. But don't be scared. This thing actually goes together very quickly and without major issues. The only issue I had was that I deleted all of the footage of me finishing and weathering the build, but I don't think Meng is necessarily responsible for that one. So, if you can forgive me for that sin, let's go ahead and open up the directions. They are very easy to follow, and overall, the kit goes together without too much heartache. If you're looking for an easy platform to practice painting and weathering Navy schemes, this kit is a great choice. Construction starts with the cockpit and wheelbase. Since I was in a hurry to finish this build before my vacation, I tried to cut out all of the parts that I could ahead of time and prime them in a big batch. Pro tip: if you need something convenient to mount all of your small parts on, some wood blocks from Amazon and some double-sided tape is a game changer. After grinding with the nippers for a few nights, I was able to have the fuselage and all of the sub-assembly parts ready for painting. The fuselage has a nice heft to it that reminds me what is so fun about building 1/48th scale jets. They just have a presence on the table that those puny little Spitfires and worse yet, Messerschmitts just don't have. But now it's time to break out my pre-mixed bottles of Mr. Surfacer 1500 in black, white, and gray. If you don't already have your primers pre-bottled, do it and thank me later. I get my bottles from Model Paint Solutions, and they work great. I get started by mixing a slightly off-white primer color to use on my gear bays and landing gear struts. Normally I wouldn't fake a paint job like this, but at the time I was going for efficiency, so getting your final color straight from the primer is nice. The wheelbase came out looking pretty nice with the amount of pre-molded details Meng gives us, and so I moved on to the landing gear that I also had assembled and ready to go. Now that that's done, we can get to the fun part and start working on the cockpit. I've grown to love building cockpits, and you're about to see part of the reason why. I start by priming everything in Mr. Surfacer Black and then breaking out the Mr. Color C 317 for our base coat. When it comes time to paint the black segments for the place the buttons and switches go, I carefully mask off the whole tub with Tamiya tape. Don't fall victim to the hairy stick mafia and tell yourself that brush painting works just fine here. It's disgusting, and it does not. Unless, of course, unlike myself, you have a single ounce of ability with a brush, in which case, it might. Up to you on that one. That said, not even I can escape their wrath forever, so I break out the brush and some Vallejo paints to pick out the details with. My only tip here is instead of using stark white for your buttons, mix up a light gray color to get a little more subtlety and realism. The stark white looks a little toy-like to me, but hey, that's just my opinion. Lastly, I give the panel a quick dry brushing to pick out the edges and details a little more. Now for the secret weapon, the tiny little cockpit decals, made by Tom Annies of Annies.io. They are definitely small at only a few millimeters in either direction, but they honestly aren't nearly as difficult to apply as they look like they'd be, and the effect they add is second to none. If I was going super hard, I would add a couple dozen of these to a cockpit this side, but I was just looking for a nominal improvement, so I only added a couple, in some strategic locations. It's hard to see on the final product, but I think you'll agree that they elevate the result quite a bit. After playing with the cockpit all day, it's time to eat our vegetables again and sand the sink marks out of the intakes. If you were going for a true show-winning build, I might say invest in some seamless intakes, but for anything short of that, the kit pieces suffice just fine. For my next trick, I'm going to show you how I like to do the screens on my cockpit instruments. It's very simple. Just take some Green Stuff World UV resin and mix in your choice of clear acrylics to get a color match, and lightly drip it in place with a toothpick. But be warned, it takes less than you think. Then, I just throw it in my 3D printer curing station, but a cheap UV flashlight will get the job done just as well. All in all, I'm happy with how this cockpit came out for being a relatively quick effort. Getting back to the gear bays, I want to give them a touch of weathering before they go in the fuselage. I start out by giving them a thin, all-over wash of a dust oil brush, followed by a combination of Payne's Gray and Burnt Umber mixed together. Be warned about this combination though. I think I used too much Burnt Umber, because the final result was far too earthy and not to my tastes. There's probably not a lot of earth on aircraft carriers, it turns out. Once all the sub-assemblies are in place, I close up the fuselage and attach the wingtips in their extended configuration. Finally, we are in my most dreaded no man's land of model building, bodywork. I try not to fret too much, but having been traumatized by some recent cough, Hasegawa, cough, action, I didn't want to deal with much for this build, and it held up that hope. I broke out the world's best abrasives in Finnish sanding stick, and I shook those joints down like they owed me money. I won't lie and say I reached perfection, but it's good enough that I can sleep at night, for now. After wiping the plastic dust off of myself, I added the kit's supplied canopy mask to the front canopy and glued it in. This is one of my more lukewarm takes, but I really think that it's worth it to just be careful and use plastic cement on the canopy. White canopy glue has never been good to me, but I continue blocking off the gear bays and cockpit so that we can finally get to the fun stuff. And don't forget your Mr. Masking Sol are the good stuff. I'd hate to see you miss out on the authenticity of these ammonia fumes. Alright, time to Vader this bad boy out with a coat of black Mr. Surfacer. You know the drill here. While I do that, you might be wondering what the black tube creeping into the frame is. That's my desktop air vent, my paint booth alternative that I made out of a cannabis grow tent air pump. If anyone finds it interesting, I can make a segment about it in a future video. Okay, buckle up, because I'm about to earn my paycheck with this tip alone. The single best method of filling seams I've ever come across. And that's saying a lot, because I've been to hell and back when it comes to ghost seams. Enter Madworks Black Superglue. Just dab it on with a toothpick, and it sands down like butter, in the best way. I've never had a smoother, easier to use filler material. If there's one thing that can make your modeling life easier, it's this stuff. Once the seams are sorted, we can get to work laying down our first camo color of light ghost gray, using MRP paint here. I like to slowly build up the coverage in random patterns over small areas to encourage some diversity in the finish, although we're going to be using another technique to properly cover that later on. The main thing is just to remember to stay close to the surface you're painting and be patient, which will ensure a smooth finish. If you are too far away, the paint will dry mid-air and create a rough, sandpapery finish. Ask me how I know. After that's done, we can move on to the dark ghost gray for the top camouflage color and some NATO black for the vertical stabilizers. It might not show up well on camera, but the NATO black is substantially different from the black primer and really beats pure black, which should be avoided in general. Nothing fancy here, but I have to finish up the inside of the exhaust cans, so whip up a basic creamy white color to paint them and add some simple weathering with my Tamiya makeup palette. Again, simple work on the nozzles, but if you need a good metallic, Mr. Color Super Metallics are excellent lacquer metallics. All right, time for another money shot that's getting a lot of hype right now, and for good reason. To get that classic weathered navy finish, we're going to be using the acrylic ink technique as described by Chris Sieber in his excellent Tomcat book, which I'll link below. The long and short of it is that you buy 2 bottles of Liquitex acrylic inks, one white and one black. Then you dilute with a little bit of Tamiya X20A thinner and wet the surface with said thinner. After that, you can stipple a layer of the white ink on. Once the ink layer is stippled on, you do a thin blend coat of your base color. Once it's blended, you repeat the process with the black ink. Here you can see what we're looking at after getting the first layer of white ink down. Next, I'll demonstrate the black ink of the flaps, since we're getting to that part of the video where my accidentally deleted footage would have been really helpful. But at least I can show you the second step. And here's the final result. Overall, especially once it's under a flat coat, I think the result is really good, given how easy it is to execute. Now I just needed to add the black design around the cockpit for the Jolly Rogers scheme. I got the specific shape with 2 or 3 millimeter Tamiya tape. It's not perfect, but hey, you can only peel and relay tape so many times before going nuts. Once I was reasonably satisfied, I laid on the NATO black. I also had to add the yellow tips on the vertical stabilizers. Take note, I added the color here but redid it later because the highlighter yellow was totally wrong. I ended up redoing it with a slightly more orange color that looks much better in the final result. After that, it was just a matter of laying the kit decals down, which went down excellently on account of being printed by Cartograph. I just added a little bit of Mr. Mark Softer and let them do their thing. Under a flat coat of VMS satin varnish, they look just about painted on. Okay, now I need to apologize and explain what an idiot I am. Basically, all of the footage of me finishing the plane got corrupted and was already deleted from the camera, so I had no way to recover it. It contained stuff like removing the seam line from the canopy, finishing the landing gear, doing all of the ordnance with its million little decals, and giving the whole plane a black enamel wash to finish off the weathering. So, sorry about that. And I'll make the next video more complete, I promise. But since this is where we are, what do you say we just jump to the final reveal? Thank you all so much for watching, and for all of your kind words on my last videos. It really means a lot to me, and now that life has settled down a little, I plan on building a lot more, very soon. Keep modeling, and be excellent to each other. I'm out.